So within a month of the Philippine Revolution, de Guzman flew to Vienna to brief Dogger and to get briefed on the Swiss banks' reaction to them trying to obtain the money out of Swiss banks to be returned to the Philippines. And to protect these assets, Guzman began the process of opening bank accounts up in Austria and transferring the money. So he was telling the banks this money is going to be transferred from Switzerland to Austria. So after this, he flew to Lebanon, which was known then as the banking center of the Mediterranean, to meet with some influential people there that helped launder money for Iran out of Switzerland during the embargo. So when he arrived in Lebanon, he called General Almonte to give him an update on the transfer. The general, being extremely busy with transformational government reform, this is during a very busy, hectic time in the Philippines. So he recommended that he obtain a position in the banking industry to the new president. So he wanted a cabinet position to be able to make it official to transfer the money. So then he traveled to Chennai with Dogger to meet with bank officials who told him how Iran was able to get money out of their bank accounts when they were frozen by Jimmy Carter. So he said he was informed that the Swiss banks would remove the Marcos money from current bank accounts and put them in different accounts to prevent huge withdrawals at one time. They didn't want $600 billion being moved out of the country or out of the banks at one time because it could really financially hurt a bank. So it was a common practice in Switzerland to protect the assets of an individual in case of a pending catastrophe or divorce or something. So it would protect the individual, also protected the bank. And in this case, it was a revolution, which the individual lost all his money and it was going to go back to the Philippines. And he was informed to go back to Hawaii and meet with the Marcos family to secure a power of attorney. This way he would have control over these bank accounts. And he could withdraw and transfer the money any given time without the Marcos' permission because the power of attorney would have given him that. So he knew General Ver, and he figured General Ver would help him be able to do this. So by this time, Corazon Aquino put Executive Order number 2 in, which froze all the Philippine assets in the Philippines, the Marcos, of the Marcos, and asking that foreign nations also freeze their accounts. So de Guzman returned to Vienna to obtain information for Ver, and who was in Hawaii with Marcos. So having successfully contacted Ver, de Guzman and Dow arrived in Honolulu. And the first meeting was just primarily just getting to know each other, catching up on what's been happening with them, how they're feeling. So it had really not a lot to do with the power of attorney. So they decided to meet again and discuss the power of attorney and the money in the Swiss banks. So during this meeting the next day, General Ver refused to talk about the money in the bank accounts, stating all the money was the Marcos's and he had nothing to do with it. And they would have to decide themselves what they wanted to done. So he told them that the accounts would be frozen and closed if all the monies be forfeited to the Philippines or Swiss governments if the money wasn't transferred out. And so it got back to the Marcoses, and the next day the Marcos family contacted him from Hickam Air Force Base. The Marcoses lived on Hickam Air Force Base for approximately 2 or 3 months before they got private residency off the base. And one thing was mentioned, and I didn't bring it up earlier, is when they arrived in the United States, they had Amy carry a box of Pampers, saying there were baby diapers in the box. Well, there was baby diapers, but inside these baby diapers were a big load of Imelda's jewelry. So Imelda was trying to smuggle in jewelry into the United States. And that's one reason they were actually confiscated. And Imelda actually said that later on that they were just thrown into housing in the Philippines. They lived so poor and everything, desperate when they lived on the base. So later on, de Guzman met with Ferdinand, Imelda, and Bongbong, and he told them about the plans by the Swiss banks to move their money and freeze it. And so to have this confirmed, Bongbong went with de Guzman to the international airport because they weren't going to use their own phone because they didn't want to be traced and everything. And they called Switzerland to confirm the matter with banker at Credit Suisse, Ernest Scheller. And he verified that the banks would freeze the money and the money would go to different accounts. So after confirmation of this, Bongbong told them what he learned. And so Imelda and Marcos kept asking questions. So they went back to the airport to call the banker again to get some more answers. But this time the operator at the phone refused to give them a connection to Switzerland. So they returned back to the base and to inform them of the situation. When they arrived, Imelda gave de Guzman a plastic bag that contained a note that said Palmy Foundation, and with more than $300,000 in traveler's checks. And a few days later, he was invited to lunch with General Ver, who gave de Guzman an Allied Bank Hong Kong cashier's check worth $150,000. So they were having money laundered to them, $300,000 in traveler's checks, $150,000 traveler's check from Lucio Tan, and requested he cash it and send Ver the money. So they were asking him to cash money from one person, Lucio Tan, the owner of Asia Brewery and Philippine Airlines, and he would cash the check, send the money to Ver, so Ver could tell everybody that nobody got money, so Ver and Marcos's names weren't even involved in this transaction. So Ver eventually told investigators that he intended to keep the money to help finance the project of returning all the money to the Philippines. So later that day, de Guzman was called by Bongbong and told him that Ferdinand and Imelda had signed off on the power of attorney and he needed to deliver it to him. So Bongbong was going to deliver the power of attorney to de Guzman. He was given information, the bank accounts, and told to talk to Ernest Scheller as soon as he returned to Switzerland to finalize the swap. So the next day, de Guzman and Dogger left Hawaii, traveling to Vienna. And soon after arriving in Zurich, they met with Scheller and presented the power of attorney to transfer the Marcos money to a bank in Vienna. So Scheller informed the two that Swiss government just put a freeze on the accounts, but he didn't show any evidence. There was no evidence. There was no money frozen. And he stated that he moved all the accounts and redocumented according to Mrs. Faye Gimenez, Imelda's personal secretary, 3 weeks before they evacuated the Philippines. So he moved the money and said, oh, it was frozen, I can't touch it, and Imelda's secretary told me to do this. Imelda's secretary was also under big investigation for taking a Monet picture and putting it up for auction and getting like $40 million for it. And then she said, oh, Imelda gave that to me as a gift, so it was mine. Yeah, okay. So de Guzman and Dogger were suspicious, especially when they learned Swiss bankers in Switzerland. While they were in Lebanon, they were told the Swiss bankers can't be trusted. They will be shady and everything. So without a formal letter, the accounts are not officially frozen. So they did not show any letter saying the bank accounts were frozen or closed. They just said they were, because they did not want to give the money to the Philippines or remove it from the the Swiss banks. So they thought Scheller at this time was stalling and to prevent any money from being withdrawn in the interest of the Credit Suisse. So they left his office, and Scheller immediately called the Swiss Federal Banking Commission to report that he believed that de Guzman was ready to transfer $213 million in Marcos money to Vienna. And later that evening, the Swiss Banking Commission, first time ever in the history of the Swiss Banking Commission, froze all the Marcoses' accounts in Switzerland, which they had no authority to do. So having the Swiss Federal Council formally freezing the accounts without knowing that the Philippines' claim on the accounts would be forthcoming, the PCGG hired 3 Swiss lawyers to help secure the funds from the Swiss banks. Now they did eventually get the money. That 230 million actually went to like 400 million with interest, and it was given to the Philippines about 6 years later, maybe 8 years later. President Ramos was president at the time. So through the lawyers, the Philippine government asked the Swiss government for help in recovering all the stolen wealth that the Marcoses did while they were in office. And he told them, he received the telex from Scheller saying that all the freeze order was still in place and he couldn't do anything about transferring money. There was no freeze order. The Swiss government or the bankers in Switzerland actually lied about it. So hearing this, General Almonte informed him of the late intent of the Philippine government and recent activities, and that many people in the Philippine government and the PCGG were having doubts about him and his previous dealings with the Danding Cuenco, one of the most powerful Marcos cronies. So this revelation prompted de Guzman to fly to Manila to present his plans for Operation Big Bird in order to repatriate all the stolen assets from the Marcos family. When he returned to Manila, General Almonte arranged a meeting with the brother of President Aquino, Pepe Cuenco. During this meeting, de Guzman, now you notice there's the same names. There's 4 or 5 families, maybe 10 families in the Philippines that are very powerful. Lopez, Aquino, Marcos, Tan, Cuenco. These people are very powerful families, and they're all married. So you got Cuenco, who's married to Marcos's daughter. You have Fox, who's related to Aquino, and so they're all these powerful families are interrelated. So in this meeting, he outlined his plan to help the Aquino government retrieve the Marcos' wealth. And since he was paying most of the expenses out of his pocket, he asked for a 20% commission on the initial funds recovered. So if he made $300 million, he just wanted $60 million back. So he showed him the information about the Swiss bank accounts, 213 million in Swiss accounts, 11 foundations, 4.5 billion in deposits, 9 different bank accounts, and 3 billion in precious metal accounts. So right there was over almost $8 billion. So $7.5 billion to $8 billion. Most importantly, he could retrieve all the money because he had the power of attorney. All he had to do was go to the bank and say, I'm taking this out and I'm transferring it to the Philippines. And seeing this, Cuenco arranged a meeting between de Guzman and Dr. Fernando Carrasco, who was present at the meeting of the PCDG, Chairman Jovito Solanga, to put his plan into action in order to get the money. So they were going to say, okay, this day you go over here, this is where the accounts go to, this is where you wire the money to. So in 1986, de Guzman met with Raul Daza, Dr. Carrasco, and Charlie Avila to brief the men on the way they're going to recover this stolen money. They wanted to get the $8 billion back. So to put the plan in action, Solanga would have to prove the plan. Solanga, hearing this news, allowed Daza to travel to Vienna with de Guzman in order to meet Dogger and associates who were committed to the retrieval of the money. However, before Daza left the Philippines, Solanga changed his mind and ordered him to stay in the Philippines in order to attend a court case. This was surprising, and they had a meeting at Solanga's residence to know the urgency and importance of finalizing the plan. At the meeting, Solanga was hesitant to go along with the plan and shifted his responsibility to the lawyers in Bern. De Guzman, frustrated with his action, asked for a letter of introduction to the Philippine ambassador who would arrange for the meeting with the Swiss lawyers. So he was trying to get the government Now, because Salonga wouldn't help out, he wanted to get the government's involvement in Switzerland to say, yes, this is right. Let this man get the money and go to the bank accounts. So after the meeting with Salonga, de Guzman and General Monti, informed of the decision, and asked the general to travel with him to Switzerland to help boost the status of the nation's needs. They wanted to have somebody who's officially involved in the government there to say, yes, we want this money. So they traveled from Pepe and Coanca's residence and informed him of Salonga's decision, and the three had decided to move forward with the plan. So they were going to Switzerland to get this money. And on June 25th, 86, the pair arrived in Vienna, where they met with Dogger and his associates, who discussed the banking procedures with Monti and different routes to take in order to retrieve the money. So knowing the de Guzman story, Dogger telexed Pepe and Coenco. This time in the time, there was no internet, there was no Skype, there was nothing. You had to send like a fax in order to get a message down quickly, or you had to call by a regular phone. So the next day, the three went to Bern to meet with a lawyer, Dr. Salvioni, who advised them that any request for money by the Philippine government must be signed by the Solicitor General of the Philippines. Now, he was stalling in order because he didn't want to do it. So many people believe that Dr. Salvioni was a Marcos crony, and he was stalling. So when the three people left the office, they were informed by Swiss officials that they learned about the presence of in the nation and may not be speeding up their actions to help withdraw the money. So they may be trying to freeze the Marcos' money as soon as possible. And in order to prevent all accounts from being permanently frozen, Almonte made a phone call to Coanco to request an emergency authorization be signed by the Solicitor General of the Philippines, and he was immediately connected to Corazon Aquino, who agreed she will have the request signed immediately. Knowing time was important, the three waited for 2 days. 2, not 1, not 4 hours, 2 days. Never came. So they flew back to Manila to obtain the letter for themselves. Once they arrived, they met with Coanco, who gave them an update and told them that the importance of obtaining the letter. Hearing the request from Coanco told them he was more than worried about failing to receive the money than he was about succeeding. He worried that the Philippine government would not be able to obtain the money, so he wasn't willing to go and try to get the money. And if they failed to get the money, it would look bad for Corazon Aquino. He then told them he would have to talk to his brother to confer about getting the letter signed the next day. All right, that's going to do it on this episode. See you next time. Bye-bye.